So with their, so anyway, this is just to give you a little bit of background why we're all here. Of course, very grateful for your input as far as the academic side from both Mimi and Pauline, who have journeyed with us this past 4 or 5 years. But just to give a little bit of background, I was at a MHR, Mega World Hotel and Resorts. I was invited to do a business innovation modalities thing with the headquarters with about 16 of the top, they call them GMs of different hotel properties spread across Manila and Cebu and other places of the Philippines. I just happened to be passing by, and I know the GM who was ordained under DAVT, Clofie, and then Clofie introduced me to Devine, who's the HR person. And so we set a date, and I flew in, and all the meetings were set up, and I invited some of our actual junior fellows who were living in the NCR Manila area to join us, right? And they did, and prayed through, and we did this certification, 1-day certification event for the Mega World hotels and resorts, blah, 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 and all that. And then at the end, because I was flying back to Singapore, I routed via Cebu, and they got to know about it. And so, the HR manager said, just rolled out the red carpet for me when I landed in Cebu, got a pickup, and then they offered me to stay overnight at or to check in at the Belmont Mactan Cebu hotel, which I didn't need to because my flight was at night. So I just had lunch and then just walked around the city and got a sense of that. But the two things struck me. One was the environment there was like two sides of Cebu. There was the spanking new, city on a hill, wow, the property and so the acreage with the gleaming new skyscrapers and all that. But then there was another side of the city. And this brings me to a letter that I received from somebody from the Cebu House of Prayer, one of the workers there. And we host sometimes the CHOP group, Cebu House of Prayer people in Singapore, and they stay with us in GBG. So she wrote to me and says, look, I have a sister who wants to work with the red light district thing, blah, 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 and all of this. And instinctively, when I replied, I said, well, stay where you are because Cebu really needs all the help it can get, but we can, we can perhaps offer some suggestions and in this upcoming incubator / accelerator in June and take the quiz, something like that. So then of course it just struck me that, well, of course they're having a problem because they're direct flights. I mean, how many Filipino cities besides Manila and Clark, how many other Filipino cities have direct flights to Taiwan or Hong Kong or Taiwan or Singapore or Korea? And of course that, plus it's like one of these native peoples and indigenous peoples who are exposed to international viruses and bugs, superbugs, social superbugs, and they don't have any immunity against it, and so they get sucked into all kinds of syndicate issues, just like Geylang did like 20, 30, 40 years ago, right? So of course they're having issues, right? And that prompted me to actually it reminded me of what Anita, your work that you're doing. So maybe we can start there with the work that you're doing. Just give us a very short background so that when we get to the actual sharing of the graduate research that has to happen before the graduation, then or rather in partial fulfillment of the requirements for the MA program, then we have a background, especially for the listener as well, because I suspect some of the students at the bachelor's level, right? Because there's really 4 levels, isn't it? There's just the certificate level, there's a bachelor's level, there's the master's level, which we're gunning for, and then there's the PhD level. I suspect that those in the certificate level and the bachelor's level would be approaching the thesis from the viewpoint of an academic exercise, just like a paper I'm writing. But that's not what I want to see happening in King's College. I want it to be more of a strategy implementation that attacks a real world problem. It's not just a theoretical thing. I don't think we have the time anymore for just theory. I think that's over. So whatever that we write on has to have some teeth and actual traction. And so hypothetically or theoretically, your case should be probably the easiest among all the other cases, because you already had something that the Lord put in your heart, right? It's not just a scripture verse. It's far more than that. It's an assignment from the Lord. So maybe you can unmute yourself, Anita, and just share a little bit about the context of Cape Town in South Africa, and then also your travels to Indonesia and elsewhere, and what you learned, just in a nutshell, just a very brief overview of Freedom Ports Alliance, or even before Freedom Ports Alliance grew up and developed to what it is now. And then also, so that we can then sort of get that background there. Go ahead.
Thank you so much, Pastor Gerard. This is really a privilege, and I just absolutely love and respect the heart of GBG, and how by God's grace we have established it to really be a safe place for people to learn, and a safe place for people to be restored and launched into their next season. And so my journey with GBG started in 2012 when Brother Greg introduced me to Pastor Gerard and said, come and see what happens to the Indonesian girls in Singapore. That was my introduction to GBG and the Lorongs and the prayer walks. And I remember on my very first night out on the streets, and maybe Pastor Gerard will remember that, for me it was a head-on collision with God's purpose and plan for my life. I mean, I was already in my 40s, nearly 50, but Lorong 12 was the head-on collision for me with my purpose. And I had 2 questions that the Holy Spirit phrased in my mind that evening, and those questions still continue to drive me. How did you get here? And how do we get you to safety without increasing the risk of re-trafficking and further exploitation? And for me, that is embedded in 2 Corinthians 5, I think it's verse 14a, that says, for the love of Christ compels us. And that for me links directly to Leviticus 19. Because as Pastor Gerard shared about the 5-year process and the journey of grace regarding King's College, we too have been on that 5-year journey where you wonder, is this ever going to happen? Is it not just better to quit and try something else? But then you realize that God has arrested your heart for something. He has captured your heart for it because He designed you for something that no one else can do. You can equip people to do the same, and and incorporate some of the things that you are passionate about, but there's no one else that can do it, because the moment you delegate it and you walk away from it, the impact will never be the same as according to God's original blueprint. So Geylang and Singapore has my heart and will forever have my heart. And I remember the last time that we left Singapore was 2015, on our way back to South Africa, relocating back to South Africa. I was standing at immigration ready to be stamped out of Singapore and to go to the gate. The lady paged through my passport, the immigration official, and I was just glancing at Paul, because that's what you do at immigration. You have that immigration pose, you keep quiet, and you just go through the process. And she looked at Paul, she looked at me, she said to me, so why don't you guys come and do here in Singapore what you are passionate about? What drives you? And we walked through, and I actually said to Paul, is that a prophecy? Is that a promise? Is that, what is that? And
That's
Gerard will
amazing.
remember that 3 years ago, I had a dream, same dream 3 nights in a row, about arriving in Singapore and friends of GBG taking me to different places. In the end, I walked out of that dream with a permanent residence in my hand. And Gerard gave me the reality check. He said to me, you know how much money you need? I'm like, that's not my problem, that's God's problem. And it's still God's problem, it's not mine. Because, yes, age-wise, and I don't qualify and for a visa and a stay permit. However, in the process, what God has done is He's shaped those two questions into the only comprehensive training manual for airport workers on how to identify human trafficking, how to respond, and how to work that knowledge and skills into your daily to-do tasks so that more victims are identified. So everybody that has read that, the training manual says it's a book that you can take off the shelf and you can read it and you can implement it as you walk. Because as they work through it, it reminds them of laws and regulations and things that needs to be done within their scope of responsibilities and how they can do their job better. So when we spoke about my thesis, I said that the story of Joseph for me is very important due to the fact that he was favored, he was exploited, he was unjustly incarcerated, but he was also the recipient of restorative justice. And God used him to save a nation and to save people. And that also is the process of seasons that we see in Leviticus 19. So using those 3 scriptures and the 2 questions, what I want to do my research and my thesis about is faith in action. How to build a just and sanctified and dignified future for overseas workers in a border fluid world. Because those are some of the threats that our overseas workers face. And just reading through that email that Pastor Gerard included me in regarding Cebu, I recalled a conversation I had with a gentleman in Dubai who said that in their 3 churches, they have 300 Filipino workers, migrant workers, overseas workers, who are only based at the airport. That's all, the only place they work is in Dubai airport. And how valuable they are for the pastor who is in charge of ministering to those awaiting repatriation. Because when the pastor brings the repatriatees to the airport, they are there to take further care and to serve them further with the love of Christ and to ensure they get on the aeroplane safely. But there's no one at home to receive them there and to help them through that process. And the same goes with the people who transit in Changi Airport. So having lived in Indonesia, the ferry ports and the airport is common ground for me. It's like, you know what happens there and what works there. And what is a great concern, and we've discussed it with people like Salvation Army, like Hagar, the need to have skilled Christians in Changi Airport to identify at-risk people and just reach out to them and minister to them in whatever way is needed. So recently I did research on the amount of passengers that only transit in Singapore every month. And we're looking at hundreds of thousands that disembark one plane. They don't go through immigration checks. They just go through a security check and they board the next plane. And I'm not saying that this happens in Singapore, but this was our experience 2 years ago in the AirAsia terminal, okay? We went to the immigration checkpoint and there was 60, at least 60 migrant workers sitting on the ground there in the passage, being interrogated by immigration. You could see the fear, you could smell the fear and the shame. And as we walked past, Paul just said to me, can't I ever just have a normal flight and enjoy a flight? Do I always have to deal with my heart and these things? And again, that was another aspect to the two questions that was formed in and phrased in Geylang. And the church is the only one who has the answer. The church is the only one who knows the answer. The church is the only one who has access to wisdom and the originator of creation, who can give us the strategies and the blueprint, the plans that will work, the plans that can work. If we're going to wait for government to fix this, we're going to wait forever. I mean, here is proof. It has taken Freedom Ports Alliance 5 years to get to the point where we have the ear of government, where they are talking about getting us back into the airport. And when we get back in the airport, we will be the only team in the whole world who does this work, who works alongside stakeholders from immigration to police to airlines to baggage carriers to screen for at-risk passengers, to intervene and to assist where we can. In that way, we protect borders and we protect people, which is God's ultimate goal, that places must be safe and people must be safe. And that is the purpose of my teaching, of my research that I'm doing, is not to point fingers on Singapore, but to say, as Singapore is the hub, and I remember the endless conversations we had about the regional Kallang landing strip, Gerard, which makes GBG such a relevant and and crucial stakeholder and role player in the spiritual realm as well as in the physical. So how can we join forces and join our skills to create safe passage and safe hubs and safe harbors for those who are vulnerable? Not only overseas workers, because in the case of Cebu, it's not only the exploitation and the trafficking and the drug trafficking and stuff that happens in Cebu. It's also the people from Cebu, the Cebuans that are drawn away from their home, from their land, into exploitation. And that is my heart to that we can answer that question by undergirding facts and solutions with the Word of God.
Right. So so we have two one major and one minor. I think the major task, we cannot handle it here in this call, which would be to create this Malaysia, Singapore, Cape Town kind of think tank with Africans and Asians together to try to tackle in collaboration with our friends from Australia and elsewhere. So many other resources that are spread all over the Asia Pacific region, Chiang Mai in the Philippines. You mentioned just now, in fact, Reverend Tess, president of Oath, Oikos Associates Trust House based in Cairns, actually. She was just telling us that there are actually 20 million just among the Filipino, the global Filipino diaspora. The numbers have risen to 20 million outside the country. But so that's the major task. This think tank, and that will come along the way. I think Scarlet Webb, you mentioned Greg, and the rest of the friends in Hagar, etc. All these different agencies, and specifically what I am excited about is your Freedom Ports Alliance, which we can get behind, and certainly, as you say, although the church may have that the academic or the theological or the biblical answers, it is actually the kingdom of God that is the fingers and the toes that will be the arms and the legs that actually spearhead these things, because the church has its own agenda and it has to survive, and of course it has to be about the business of revival prayer, etc., healing and the sick and the elderly, the children, and so on. So many agendas at the local church level, education included at the Seminary Gate, raising the next cadre or the next echelon of leaders to take over the reins. But in the process of doing that, of course, we can have a separate think tank agency that could serve in missional consultation, just gathering of the different eagles, the gathering of the different, eagles, lions, ox, and men around and the table, so that we can then say, okay, what's next, Lord? There's downstream, there's upstream, there's so many aspects of the problems that, I mean, it's very different being a pastor in Singapore than would be for me to be a pastor in Tulsa, Oklahoma, or Kansas City, surrounded by in the Bible Belt or something like that. We are surrounded by demons and all sorts of illegitimates and con men and scammers and all sorts of things. So this is the environment in which we're operating, and the darkness. But we, the darker the darkness, the lighter the light, right? So we shine and we open our doors. But there must be also uh, civil order societies like yourself. I mean, that is part of the benefits or the good things about coming out of Geneva and New York and all of these different organizations that are standing up for some sort of an agenda, right? So that's the major task, and that is perhaps maybe beyond beyond our lifetime. Actually, we may not be able to get everything, but certainly, the thought came about Wilberforce and Wilberforce and those kinds of people, who are like founders, like William Carey. I mean, you never imagine what, or Hudson Taylor. You never imagine. Maybe he just thought it was a mission trip, right? And he ended up to be founding the modern founder of the China Inland Missions or India Missions. We're in contact with Vishal Mangal Wadi, a philosopher, a Christian thinker, about the impact of a Christian India or a Christian Asia, and what are the repercussions, especially the policy decisions of governments about anti-conversion laws, et cetera, et cetera. So that may be beyond our lifetime, but if we don't start now, then when will we start, right? I mean, we have to. You have boldly, courageously put it down on paper. Now that leads us to the next step, right? And if we're smart as a seminary, and obviously we are smart, right? I mean, we have to be smart. You cannot have multiple choice questions and fill in the blanks anymore. I mean, this is the age of the AI already. So, we have AI co-pilots for that sort of thing, right? So my policy as far as AI is concerned is that it should be it should be the guide on the side, not the sage on the stage. So you are the sage on the stage. In other words, you are the KPI. You are the key person of influence, right? And your thesis, in your case, is very clear. Why can we not convert what you already have into the format that would be acceptable to our provost, the readers, as well as the dean of graduate studies, and so at this level, if we find talented people with pre-existing implement strategies to be implemented, and I would imagine that it is so relevant in the transformation of airports from simply landing strips back 100 years ago to now what would be considered as aerotropolises, something like a metro. I mean, Singapore is building its fifth terminal. Apparently, I don't know what's going on, but something's going on, and you know, and if you think about an airport, it's one of the most fascinating places, right? On the surface, which for a kid, just when I was a kid growing up, I was fascinated. Even the simple, like Cambodia, I was fascinated by Cambodian propeller plane in 1965, right? And then, the different countries and the different technologies and the different kinds of people that you meet in an airport. But it's also become one of the most dangerous places because of this prevalence of illegitimate or bastard spirits that are lurking around, spiritually seeking to wreck and ruin and torture people. Literally, that's what Satan does. Either through disease or through mental thing or through, in this case, buying and selling of humans as commodities for whatever reason. there is a market for this sort of thing. And so airports become the hubs for evil. And what you are doing is an amazing, to me, I can't imagine having these kingdom patrols, prayer patrols, or sanctioned by governments, or airlines, working together with airlines, or indeed training crews to spot all of these kinds and there have been success stories where people have been rescued, praise the Lord, or there has been intervention of some sort at all the different various stages of the so-called value chain, or the evil value chain, from the operators and the pimps on the actual streets, all the way to the people who pick them up, all the way to the procurement upstream of these women and girls in the sort of rural heartlands, or the pasture lands, or the wastelands. So definitely the big major task is there, and that's for sure. That has to happen, that all that thinking, all of that strategy has to happen. But then if we can begin with, and here's where I want to ask Mimi and Pauline for your input. What are your thoughts about how could we award, confer a degree, appropriate to the level of the intensity at which Anita and Paul are actually moving with this training manual. Just the manual itself is so critical, because a manual, don't look down on a manual. I actually saw a manual in the United Nations, Palais des Nations in Geneva, in the bookshop. And I didn't have money at the time to buy the manual because it was like 60 Swiss francs or something like that. So I just turned to the back, and I think I just took a picture, or I screenshot the QR code or something like that. And from there, I developed, just so easy. I read the online version, the free online download of it. And the name of the book is the name of the non-Levitical ordination program that we have today. It's called Direct Assistance to Victims in Trafficking.
Oh, wow.
DAVT. But since then, of course, we changed the trafficking to trauma, because there's trauma is so much wider than just trafficking. But I would say the first 10 years or so in Geylang, was the T represented trafficking. Anyway, let me hear from the others, and because I don't have the answers, Anita, I don't have the answers for you, but I believe the community has the answers, and we have super qualified people today. Pauline is handling our Learning Resource Center. It's a fledgling project, but it is a sign to me that the favor of the Lord is upon us through this gift from the Kwek Sui Hua personal library, or theological library of 3,000 volumes. So let's hear from different ones. Of course, Mimi is a former educator with the Malaysian government. So we're very privileged to have all these different resources. I don't have the answer. You want to comment first? Who wants to comment first? Maybe Mimi, you want to unmute and just give us some thoughts, and then from there, maybe Pauline, you can bounce off some of these ideas as the Lord gives you. Yeah, go ahead. Yes. Okay, you're on.
Yes, it's really amazing just hearing what you have shared, Anita, and definitely it would be of great benefit to the rest of us who are listening, even though I have little experience with trafficking. I feel that whatever you have inputted, even in the email that you sent to Pastor, the suggestions that you have made is of such a level that it would be good that many more are aware of it, of them. And what Pastor Gerard is suggesting is that we can really appreciate this level of understanding from you in a very special way. It is in the realm of our we call in terms of just ministering to the pastoral side, the leaders in the world of, in the family of God, rather than just taking it for granted at an academic level. So Pastor is suggesting that we would be able to appreciate you at a different level, considering that it would be I'm not sure if you're already familiar with the ordination, but that is something that is very practical, really practical, to acknowledge the work that you've done. And it's wonderful just reading what, from the email, just reading what you have done and proposing. It is on track for what the rest of us need to learn and flow from there, something so much deep in our hearts to be part of, I would say, for practical purposes.
Yeah, maybe anybody has a question that you could ask, that maybe that could help tease out, what is the task ahead here? Yeah.
I would like Anita to express more what she thinks she wants to do further about the platform, or the, what she calls it, the Freedom Port Alliance planning. Yeah, what are your further plans or practical things you think can be done, or what's the next step you want to take?
Much for your comments and questions. Freedom Ports Alliance has a global vision. Even though at this stage we're only 4 people, the vision that we have is that everyone who holds an airport and seaport permit needs to have access to this information and know how to identify someone at risk, how to respond in a trauma-informed manner, and how to report. Our manual is literally written on integrated responsibility and accountability sharing principles, because no one and no industry and no sphere can do it on our own. In our recent research, we came to the quantification that if every permit holder in every airport and seaport worldwide knows or is equipped with this knowledge, an average of 300,000 more victims will be identified annually. That's a lot. I'm not even thinking about the ripple effect that we don't have the resources to take care of all of them. But that's a lot. And we had conversations with the corporate bodies like IATA and ICAO and Airports Council International 3-4 years ago, asking them if we could partner with them. And they said they'll get back to us because we do more than they do, and they never got back to us. We have now again approached all the organizations to ask for accreditation for our training manual. And one of our friends who is a professor at the University of South Africa, she said to me, how do you want an institution to accredit your training if they don't understand the solution that you're bringing? because to have it accredited, someone must understand what you're trying to do. So that is one quest that we have, is to find someone who can help us get accreditation, and hopefully international accreditation. The second thing that we want to do is, in the same way that our airports company is talking about implementing our training manual as part of their mandatory annual training for all permit holders. It is a prerequisite to have your permit renewed. We would like to present that training at every airports company, every aviation training center where possible. And I can honestly say that it sounds huge now, but looking at the trends that we see and the main airports that are exploited by criminals, we would like to present this training in the Middle Eastern airports, in Singapore, in Bali, in the Malaysian airports, and Singaporean airports and seaports, as well as get into the Indonesian ports. Because ultimately, yes, our heart is for Asia, and that has always been our heart. So if we can just present this training, number one, to these airports and to their staff, it will already make a huge difference, because it will change the way in which they screen passengers and screen documents, in which they clear people before they stamp them into the country. And that is, so those are two of the aspects that we are passionate about. The other thing that I would like to hear your feedback on is, would it be beneficial for King's College if we make this training if we add this training manual to your library, and could we perhaps work on extracting the most important aspects of it and make a mini course of it? Online education that is easy and accessible for everyone, because those are the important things too. This is not about me, this is God's solution. Can we share it with as many people as possible? Can we empower as many people as possible? I don't have access to the decision makers, but maybe in your networks, you have access to decision makers who we can present this to and say, come, let's do this training. I mean, we had a conversation with Cheryl Chong the other day, and she said, as futuristic as Changi Airport is, AI cannot screen for vulnerabilities. You have to marry human skills and human efforts with AI. So those are some of the solutions that we want to bring. And just due to the sheer volume of people that transit in Singapore and transit in Malaysia, especially in the AirAsia KLI2 terminal, and foreigners, I mean, those would be the two ports where we would really love to present our training.
I really appreciate your sharing and your heart especially. And I appreciate also the experiences that you have had all these years with trafficking, the women that are being trafficked. And I think you are definitely passionate for them. And I feel that you are praying for them. I feel that your heart is there in this work, wholeheartedly in this work. Just wondering from my side, like when 2 points meet and to draw a straight line, maybe you are at one point where you desire for a the deliverance of women. And if you're talking about the airport, then you are talking about the custom officers that who are able to check if trafficking is taking place at the airport. First, the customs must of that country or that airport must be truly wanting to take out the 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 problem, right? If the custom officers are corrupted and they are part of this whole syndicate, then we have a very big problem that we can't trust the police and we can't trust the custom officers, and no training will be able to overcome the problem. So I'm not sure in how effective the customs are at putting these traffic operations on hold in Singapore or Malaysia, because I'm not in the work. And I personally know of a woman who trafficked other ladies. Yeah, and I worked with her because she converted, and we worked in the rehabilitation center for women out of prison. So she started giving back to God for serving in a rehabilitation center. I also had experience being stopped at a customs officer because I was with my daughter, and they think I'm a trafficker. And so when you travel with a single lady, then people are wondering, are you a trafficker? You know, and I understand that. I was not so super offended. Okay, she should have a picture closer to her face, facial recognition. So I don't know how effective Singapore is at weeding out bad character or bad seeds. And so if you want to have a plan or a training, or if you are trying to like bring awareness, right, then maybe specialized agencies like need to train the staff. And if you want a course, then it has to go through these agencies that are actually conducting the courses. So I have a friend who is also personal friend who is also a trainer at SIA. So she trains the staff. I don't know what she trains the staff. She's very secretive about her work. So she trains the staff. If it were for stewards, then they need to know how to serve the people. If it's for customs officers, they need how to weed out the bad character or spot the different. If it's for, I'm not sure what she's training the people for. So we have to, if you are an individual or if you are a small group like 4, I'm feeling that you're coming against a very big organization, if you even want to talk about nation to nation as a global thing. So maybe it will be helpful if the 4 in your group could actually connect with the airport customs and have a relationship with people and ask them if you can do any volunteer work to help them out in their operations. That could be a way if they are open to you. There are people who are not open at all to people who have no connection. You have no reason to be and no connection unless you are a trusted individual. So for example, in the JC or the school that I'm involved with, I have no opportunity to join the prayer if I'm not a parent of a student in the school, right? Because who are you to join the prayer in the school if you are not even connected to any student in the school? So I think we have to start with that. The first relationship and how you can find your way in, and whether there is, through your years of interaction with people, have a trust. Maybe it is something that must be given by God. when you were sharing, I asked Lord, what are your plans, and I asked God, uh, since Pastor shared that Satan does torture people and ruin their lives, and then I asked that God, please make Anita's plan successful. If his plan is a good plan, then make it successful. And this plan has to be answered by Jesus. I think it takes a miracle for, like, I think it's a miracle. You're waiting for a miracle, just like Simeon in the days of old in the temple. Yeah, he's waiting for Messiah to appear. And when he did, he recognized him. I mean, it's very special. Of all the people, only Simeon. Yeah. So we are all waiting for our miracles. I am waiting for my miracle. Yeah. I was not very much in touch with you, so I'm not very sure, like, exactly how things have been going on. So yeah. But yeah, we can start from here.
I think it's one thing to get the data on paper and share it with you all and make it known. The other thing is to really like-minded people who are experienced in government sectors, in business, because you need ethical business to fight the illicit trade. So civil society don't have that solutions. We have the ideas, but we don't have the background and the information how to bring about ethical business to fight the illicit trade. If we are very honest, the work that civil society organizations do, in many cases, in the humanitarian sphere, is actually the mandate of government. So it's not only us, but even with the recent grant cuts and everything, I believe God allowed this because civil society needs to rethink what we do, because we can be much more effective if we change the solutions that we bring into ethical business, where we're not helping out, we're providing a professional service for which people are invoiced, they pay it, and we can pay people to do the work, experts to do their work. So I believe that although this is a very shaky time for many civil society organizations, I believe God allowed the grants to be cut globally so that we can rethink what we do, how we do it, and how we're going to fund it. Because CSOs have this stop-start trend for centuries because everything is grant dependent. But if we change our mindsets to become service providers, to become business owners who provide professional services that has the right to be paid, that we have the right to be remunerated for, that will change the world, the whole system. Because in that way, we value the professional services that we provide, but we also honor and value the experts that we have on our teams. And with a global unemployment rate that keeps on escalating, we need to change the systems around from being donor and grant related, and please help me, to being service providers. And so if I look at what I'm writing now, and I would like to share our training manual with you so that you have more insight, if you're interested to have, if you have more insight as to what will come from the thesis. And this is my heart, my initial heart, is that we get the right people from the different spheres together in a think tank, people across the world, to say, okay, how do we find solutions to protect borders and to protect people in a border fluid world? Millions are at risk.
Are there some already known solutions?
Well, yeah, there are the known solutions. It's just to get them implemented. So if we look at statistics, okay, 1% of the estimated 50 million victims of trafficking are ever rescued, okay? 1% of all air travel passengers are declared inadmissible. In other words, they are rejected at the borders. They cannot enter a country, okay? For each inadmissible passenger, the airline is paid a penalty of between $2,000 and $10,000 per passenger that is rejected, okay? That passenger is only rejected because at the port of origin and at the transit port, that passenger's papers and documentation and supporting documents were not checked, okay? A significant percentage of those inadmissible passengers are victims of trafficking. If we can find a solution, a way that we can say, airlines, we will save you money. Work with us. Then, I mean, one airline in the Middle East allocates 3% of their annual budget only to those penalties. Can you imagine if all their staff are trained to identify red flags and to screen documentation properly? The biggest problem is the people dealing with passenger documentation take shortcuts. According to international law, you have to have a paid and issued return ticket. You need to have a visa. You need to have paid accommodation. And all the dates must match, okay? So now you have people coming in with one-way, with a single one-way ticket. They have a itinerary on booking.com or on Expedia or one of those. It's not paid, it's not issued. It's from a port that they will never go to. It's from a different place in the country that they will never depart from. They have a visa that was issued in a country they've never been to, and a new passport that was issued in a third country. And they say, well, I'm here. Don't deny me my dream. And what we're saying is that to get the airlines on board, they will eventually save money. Because yes, they will pay us for the training and for the services that we provide. But in the same way, they will reduce their financial losses and their risk and threats that they face. Like the one gentleman that we intercepted from Bangladesh, he traveled on someone else's passport, okay? He had worked in Malaysia as a construction worker for 9 years. Then he was trafficked through Bali to Lampung, where he worked for another 3 years, okay? He was trafficked through Medan back to Malaysia, through Ethiopia to Cape Town. When I asked him, apparently I was the first one to notice that he was at risk. So when I spoke to him, he said to me, I'm here to see the mountain. And I was like, okay, let's try again. And then I started to speak Indonesian to him, and well, then he could speak Indonesian. I'm like, oh, you've been there long. If you can speak the Malay and Indonesian. So what happened to him is that the airline told us they will pay the penalty, but the aviation law was last updated in 1973. So they have no other option but to send him back to Malaysia. And we were like, he doesn't meet the Malaysian immigration requirements. He can't enter Malaysia. It doesn't make sense to send him there. Confiscate his passport and send him back to Bangladesh. And they said, we'll try, but we can't promise. Like, okay, so that day when we passed through the KLA2 terminal, I asked one of the immigration officials, so say for instance, we have a possible victim of human trafficking arrive in Cape Town. That is what we do. How do we help you to bring this person to safety? And this guy with a lot of gold on his shoulder, and he said to me, send them back to us, we'll take care of it. I was like, wrong answer. There's a desperate need for safe global repatriation systems. We need to create that. We need to get the airlines on board. If we can get someone or the people that you know in the aviation industry to join us in this think tank, that we can find solutions, create safe repatriation frameworks, get airlines on board, say, can we partner? We have solutions and we have funding to do what we need to do as well. And they save, they benefit, and we do, but I mean, they benefit more than we do. For us, it's just a privilege to serve. And it's very difficult to serve these corporates.
Right.
And it's
Okay.
very difficult
Yeah. Thanks
serve
for that.
government as well.
Yeah. I think, Anita, part of your paper or part of your thesis will obviously have to deal with the funding issues that you mentioned just now, contrasted with the typical NGO or CSO approach, dependent on donors, right? So obviously it is a business, and as a business, you are then, if you are for people business, obviously going to be somebody has to be the voice of that and the face of that business. And just like any other business, there needs to be a plan, right? And just like in many other businesses and startups, there is a great risk here of getting mired in the things that startups get mired in, especially in the first few years. Of course, if it is a kingdom business, then obviously the king is going to sanction that and going to be funding that. So doesn't seem to be a way out from the founder-led approach, that as a founder, as a key person of influence, you need to apply those business principles to incubate at first, and then obviously part of that incubation could be the documentation, which you have already done the documentation. The question is, can the documentation at the seminary level be accepted as a thesis, as is, or do we need to let the manual or the documentation, the FPA, documentation be an appendix to your actual thesis that you write, which I would imagine would be the ideal case where the dean gets a chance to actually see a fresh piece of paper, but of course, powerfully supported by documentation that perhaps in a previous season you had already previously written. So you're almost writing an extended cover letter, which could then be digitalized somehow through podcasts, through, in fact, I would love to have a podcast with you actually on this topic. You know, a long form podcast. There could be short form types of media, digital media, where you're actually going to airports and speaking from airports and interviewing passengers and so all kinds of wild and creative ways that people nowadays use the digital spaces to get their message out as founders and as startups. Almost like these social media people and so on and so forth. These are asset build-outs, digital asset build-outs that would require some careful planning, a camera, and just your time to think through and to Google, you know, how to do these things and watch the relevant YouTubers who already do this. They'll probably, as you say, just be that 1% or maybe a 1% of a 1% who will catch and see this online, a government or somebody who will then at least be notified that such an organization exists, and if they want to get to know you. In other words, the common business term that comes to mind at the beginning of any sales cycle, since it is a business cycle of some sort, is the word pitching. The idea that as Priestley and some of the other people have mentioned, you get what you pitch for. And you never stop pitching. There's this continuous the continuous voice in the wilderness until somebody picks it up. Like John the Baptist, he was kind of like pitching, right? He's pitching, and then one day Jesus shows up and queues up in the line and says, "Okay, you do me," you know. And of course, that changed his ministry, but it accelerated it. But unfortunately, it was too fast. I mean, it was the end of an era, beginning of something completely new, and it was very sad that he lost his life in the doing. He never actually saw the rise of his protege, his cousin, right, Jesus, to come up. What an amazing journey that would have been. But somehow he was taken out of the plot. He didn't have plot armor. So we trust that you have plot armor, and you are the David before some massive Goliath giant of human trafficking with your little slingshot. And you're not afraid, obviously. I mean, everything about you, your countenance, your deportment, your bearing is very clear, right? That there's no fear, and as a result, you get results. You get what you pitch for, right? I remember you were irritated one time when you were staying with us in Geylang, because the guy underneath was doing, at 3 a.m. in the morning, he was fixing cars and turbocharging engines, and they were racing up and down Geylang Street. So you were irritated by that, and I think you called the police or something like that. Well, I don't know if you knew, but shortly after that, that guy his license was revoked from, he wasn't allowed anymore to have access and to the downstairs property. That's how we ended up to have a new tenant there, a hardware store. So there
I
you go.
actually
You get what
prophesied-
you pitch for,
I
right?
actually prophesied over him.
You prophesied over him, right? And he was a nice guy. I mean, he knew the power of God, right? He had tattoos all over his body. He knew the power of God, and he has a great testimony as well, I'm sure, because of that. But just as an example, that's what I mean. You get what you pitch for, and same thing with Shinta in Lorong 12. Same thing with so many that came through our door, even among the Filipinos who are now back home, married with children, leading their own churches in their own respective, their own heartland communities, building in the provinces, in the sugar, in the rice fields, the plantations, and so on and so forth. Tremendous revival prayer movements that came out of a gospel pitch, a pitch that says that, hey, we're looking to start a gospel village in all these different areas of Asia. Would you help us? You know, and of course, you get what you pitch for. It's very true. It's only unfortunate that I don't have the money to pay all these pitch engineers. I don't know what else to call them, but there are people like Daniel Priestley and Glenn Carlson and so on. Super expensive. A pastor cannot possibly afford that. But if I had the money, I would pay that. You know, I would pay professionals to actually help me to pitch. But that's really out of my league, and so we make do with what we have, which is Matthew 6:6, going into our prayer closet. And I think the constraints that you're facing, and we're all facing these constraints. Every minister of the gospel is facing, you know, constraints, but the constraints can become a blessing too, because you know, you think of the cocoon and the butterfly that's constrained inside that cocoon. There's a reason for it. Hopefully it doesn't die in the cocoon. The vision shouldn't die, but it needs the cocoon to struggle. And it's through the struggle that somehow it comes out, you know, the vision eventually. So I'm super, you know, I think what we could do is I don't know whether a think tank is you know, appropriate, but maybe it can be a kingdom think tank or a prayer tank because prayer can do wonders and accelerate amazing things. From Matthew 6:6, it says, go into your closet and shut the door. And then in Matthew 6:26, it says, look at the birds. I would imagine that the birds in Matthew 6:26, there will come a time when you will actually look at the birds. I'm talking about these big aviation birds, these planes. He says, look at the birds in Matthew 6:26, but you don't get there unless you begin with Matthew 6:6, which is go into the closet, isolate, and shut the door. So, you know, we have a saying in the ministry, right? It's better for God to break your legs, and so you can stay in the closet, than for you to be roaming around and walking in the flesh, because it's only by the Spirit and it's only by revelation that we're able to look at the birds. There will be a time when you can look at the birds. I think there will come that Matthew 6:26 moment where you can consider the lilies and look at the birds. Those two things go together, the planes as well as the lilies, the gulls that actually are being, you know, trafficked. But then right now, I think we're still in that Matthew 6:6, shut the door stage. And we can't get around it. But while you're in that place, I think we will cut the recording here, and then if there is any specific questions, we can perhaps you can